I have to unmute myself. Thank you, David. That's Nancy Griffith has always been one of my favorite singers. And I didn't know that one, so that was fun for me to hear a new song from her. And thank you to everyone else who chooses today to be part of this spiritual community. I counted it up yesterday. This is our 10th Sunday meeting virtually. I didn't believe it when I looked. I had to count it 3 times because I was sure I miscounted somehow. Today is the Sunday before the Memorial Day Monday holiday. And formally, Memorial Day is set aside to recognize, remember, and honor those who gave their lives while in military service. And weirdly, I guess, for many of my friends who lived in the central part of the country, it was the first weekend of the gathering of extended families at cemeteries where their ancestors were buried. They would clean up around the grave sites, put flags on the graves where appropriate, and then they would have this great big family reunion at the cemetery. I always thought that was just so weird because it wasn't part of my history. And since many of us have become so very mobile, moving from place to place, moving away from our family homes, from our generational parts of the country, a lot of the old traditions disappear or they fade, along with a lot of historical memory. And this is neither good nor bad, it just is. And yet, even if we don't gather together as family units, and we're certainly not doing it this year, even if we normally do, many of us still retain within ourselves those connections to individuals in our past who have been important to us in some way. Some of these people that we remember and ponder and consider might have been actual people we knew in real life, and others might have been imaginary people we met in books or movies, or real people that we read about or heard about. I was looking for a source of a quote yesterday that I came across that was supposedly said or written by some French guy. I never did find an originator for it. The quote goes, "The past is always present." And it is always present. And it's more present when we're not paying attention to ourselves. I never did find the person who said it first or wrote it first, but I did find a quote by Bruce Springsteen, which I thought was pretty funny. "The past is never the past. It's always present. And you'd better reckon with it in your life and your daily experience, or it will get you, and it will get you really bad." And if anyone would have a good understanding of that, it would be Bruce. So there's value in being aware of where we're from, what we're made of, and who or what shaped us. In Dr. Edward Viljoen's book, Ordinary Goodness, a book that many of us read together back in August of 2017, he credits his grandmother, Florence, with shaping the good parts of his character. He wrote, "She was right about so many things, about the power of choosing to be kind, about the inclination of things to work themselves out, about the futility of complaining, gossip, or being mean-spirited, and the pointlessness of contributing anything other than our natural-born goodness." I'll let you think about that for a second, because we have so many opportunities in our world to do exactly the opposite of each of these things. To be kind, to believe that things will work themselves out, to recognize the futility of complaining, gossiping, or being mean-spirited. Not that anyone here, of course, would ever do that. And the pointlessness of contributing anything other than our natural-born goodness. Because we are, and we forget. And so when we remember that and we choose to focus on bringing that to the table, bringing that to the conversation, bringing that to our presentation of ourselves in the world, then we benefit, and so does everyone around us. In 1675, Sir Isaac Newton was credited with saying, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Best I could find yesterday when I was looking, this statement was probably common knowledge in the educated world at that time, 1675. The idea seems to have been quite a bit older. There were a couple of different people of different nationalities that claimed to have originated that statement in the 1150s and the 1200s. One was French and one was English, and they both said it was theirs. Anyway, whatever. And we do, every one of us, stand on the shoulder of our own giants, our own ancestors, our own predecessors, whether they were related to us by biology or not. Today is about remembering those who inspired us, who protected us, and who created a path forward for us. Every year or so, I bring out a little worksheet called Who I Came Here to Be. Some of you have seen it and worked with it before. It typically appears as part of a class. I tried it on a Sunday once, and it was really challenging to work, to make sense of it, to complete it in the 20 or so minutes of a Sunday talk. It's deceptive and sneaky because it starts out asking about people you admire. Just make a list, people you admire, and then asks you to identify 3 qualities that those people exhibit, or personality traits that you think of when you think of them. And then it gets sneaky. On my list, one of the people I admired was a professor that I had in college as an undergraduate. His name was Dr. Mike Cousins. We called him Dr. C. He was kind, he was funny, he was actually honestly interested in the students, and he wanted everyone to succeed in the way that was most meaningful to them, whether he agreed with their choices or not. Dr. C was a good man. When I first arrived on campus at this university in Northwest Florida as a transfer student, I wanted to be a high school biology teacher. I had taken an undergraduate botany class at junior college from a fellow that was so desperately boring. I believed that botany was miserably, desperately boring. And Dr. C was the only botanist on the staff at this small public university and taught all the botany classes. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time. And when I told him I wasn't interested in taking any botany classes because they were boring, he didn't raise an eyebrow, or if he did, I didn't notice, and he didn't try to change my mind. We set up my program of study to cover all the necessary classes, and then he invited me to join an adventure over spring break one year, to go with a group of botany students to look at ferns in the mountains of Virginia. We had a blast, and I changed my mind about botany. It wasn't this dull, boring thing. It was actually about life. It didn't make any difference in my course of study, but it did open my eyes to a bigger possibility and resulted in me signing up for a graduate degree in botany a couple of years later, when I realized after 2 years of teaching junior high that I wasn't cut out to be a junior high science teacher. What I learned from Dr. C was that compassion, true listening were important, and that it was possible to have a lot of fun while doing very good work. So think for a minute about those who you would write down on your list. Think about those people you admire. I also had imaginary people on my list, like Gandalf and Captain Picard and Captain Janeway, because those were people I admired from my past, from my world. What qualities do these people that you look up to these giants that you You stand on their shoulders. What qualities did they have that you admire? Usually, if you've made your list of 6 or 7 people that you admire and list 3 qualities of each one that you admire, you'll start noticing patterns. Things that you admire in these folks, they're similar things. And it's a real kicker, a bit of a surprise at first, when you recognize that those shared admirable qualities are what you have come here to be. Or to say it another way, those shared qualities are your own personal potential, because you have to decide to do them, roadmap of your own enlightened expression of being. For Dr. Edward, it included the power of choosing to be kind, the belief that things tend to work out, which means we don't have to make them, the futility or the uselessness of complaining, gossiping, or being mean-spirited, and the pointlessness of contributing anything other than positivity. Based on what I have seen of him and know of him, he does a pretty good job of living those attributes. Another idea that I want to fold into today's talk is this idea of mental equivalence. Reverend Lynn talked about these a little bit when she spoke last week. Dr. Holmes wrote about it in today's spiritual thought that Shelley read a little bit ago. Everything on the physical plane is a poor imitation of its mental equivalent, and its mental equivalent is almost as poor an imitation of its spiritual prototype, because spiritual prototypes are the universality stepped down into our mental equivalents. I wish I could have told her to say what she did when she finished reading this thought, because it is kind of a brain bender. So what do those words mean? There is a divine idea that lives behind every single one of our beliefs about ourselves and everything we experience in our world. This divine idea is a spiritual prototype. In Foundations class, and in lots of other ones, we talk about the divine ideas, the God ideas, the big picture. We talk about capital L, love, capital J, joy, capital P, peace, as divine realities or spiritual prototypes. How we step those down into something we can imagine as showing up as us, as being true for us in human form, become our mental equivalent. And then as we match those and live them, that's what shows up as us. And the reason that's true is that's what we believe is true. It's really simple. It can be something very, very positive, something neutral, or something negative. Another one of my role models had been a biology teacher I had in 10th grade, and I didn't think of her as a role model at first, but she nicknamed me the B+ student, because no matter how hard I tried, the best I could do was a B+. Now it was a 92 B+, because back then you had to have a 93 to have an A, but it was still a B+. And it wasn't until many, many years later when I realized I had been working with a deeply embedded but very active unconscious limiting belief about myself, a mental equivalent that said I shouldn't be too smart or too good or shine too brightly, because that would make other people look bad and they wouldn't like me. That was my mother's story. And I didn't realize that I had bought into it and accepted it and believed that it was mine. That story about not shining took a long time to untangle, mostly because I didn't actually know it was there. I had all the evidence staring me in the face. It takes real skill to consistently score 92% on papers and tests for an entire semester. I didn't have the capacity to be able to see it. at all until the teacher started teasing me about it. We blind ourselves to the good that's available to us by our own internalized stories that we have taken in, believed, and then taken on and embodied. If we're paying attention, we get help in seeing these blind spots. Have you ever had a mentor who thought you could do something you didn't think you could do? Did that mentor's belief in you allow you to accomplish more than you imagined you could? That's another application of spiritual prototype coming down to mental equivalent, except you borrowed somebody else's mental equivalent and hitched your wagon to their star, as it were. There's a story Mary Morrissey tells about when she was a high school senior or a high school graduate, of a chaplain who comes into her hospital room. She was an unwed mother with a child, and she really shamed herself because she believed she was bad, because she had had some nookie with her boyfriend over spring break when she was a junior. And so here she is, an unwed mother going to high school, and she had all this shame crap that she was living. And it manifested in her body by destroying a kidney. So she's in the hospital the night before she's being prepped for surgery to remove the destroyed kidney. And this chaplain comes in and says, tell me the story about you and you being here and this kidney and so on and so on. And the chaplain listens. And the chaplain says, can you imagine it's possible that we do a prayer and your kidney is healed? And she says, no. Then the chaplain says, okay, fine. Can you imagine we do a prayer and all that negativity that you carry in your body goes into that kidney that the doctors are going to take out? And then the kidney that's left that still has function is able to recover. Can you believe that? And Mary said, I couldn't believe it, but I could see she did. So I thought, well, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could allow myself to believe that she believes it, so it's possible. And then the chaplain gave her some visualizations, really, to do every time she wanted to shame or blame herself for having a child out of wedlock and for becoming or for seeing herself as less than she was capable of being. And so she had the surgery. They took the damaged kidney out, and then she would go to the doctor after, and she started recovering. She started getting better, and the doctors were confused because this didn't happen. And she realized she was hitching her wagon, hitching her belief to this belief that the chaplain had, that she didn't have to be ill, that she didn't have to blame and shame herself into dying because she had done something that was socially unacceptable. And now, 50 years later, Mary is doing really well. And she tells this story as a way of reminding us that we don't have to be stuck in stories that we have believed in the past. We can lift ourselves up by choosing the stories we choose to believe. So that's a very critical thing to remember, because it gives us a way to change our mental equivalents. It gives us a way to change the story we tell ourselves when we discover that we have believed something that was false or not really entirely correct. And we can change the story we tell ourselves and move into a different reality. And then there is space. We open and allow space for a different reality to come into our experience. So in the front piece to a Holmes reader on practical wisdom, Dr. Ernest Holmes wrote, "Our business is to convert failure to success, to transmute disease into life-giving wholeness, to neutralize the effects of fear and sorrow through an inner awareness of yourself, peace, and love. We take everything that does not belong to this great reality and trade it in, as it were, for that which ought to be. We swap old ideas for new ones. So there's the challenge, right? Our business is to convert failure to success, to transmute disease into wholeness. And we do this by changing how we think about our world and our past and our present and what's possible for us. We do this, actually, we start doing this because we have to decide, we have to recognize that we've got this story going. And we have to decide for ourselves that we wish to have a different story. And then we get to recognize that we are always surrounded by people, circumstances, and situations that help us move in the direction of our mental equivalent that supports our dreams, that supports our desires, that supports our ability to become who we are called here to be. Sometimes that support will look helpful, and sometimes it will look like a taunt or a tease. But seen with clear vision, it all serves to lift us up. So I want to close with two pieces of poetry by David Whyte. The first is from a poem called Maumeen, which, as best I can tell, is a mountain pass in the Connemara Mountains in Ireland. It goes like this. Remember the way you are all possibilities you can see, and how you live best as an appreciator of horizons, whether you reach them or not. Admit that once you have got up from your chair and opened the door, once you have walked out into the clean air, toward that edge, and taken the path up high beyond the ordinary, you have become the privileged and the pilgrim, the one who will tell the story, and the one coming back from the mountain who helped make it so. And the second is a poem I've shared before, and I really like it. It's called Everything is Waiting for You. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone, as if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witness to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely, even you at times have felt the grand array, the swelling presence, and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom. Alertness is the hidden principle of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. And the tiny speaker in your phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even now as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. We do stand on shoulders of giants, whether we know it or not, or remember it or not. My request today is that you do notice, you do remember, you do appreciate and celebrate anyone and everyone who has ever held you up and helped you to become who and what you are today, and who you will choose to be in the future. So do that. See what you desire to be. See what you choose. See how you choose to show up in the world. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So now I want to slide right into the prayer, the affirmative prayer. So I'd ask you to hold in your mind some mentor that you had, some helper that you had, and the gifts that they gave you that you may or may not have completely embodied yet. And if it happens to be 2 or 3 or 5, that works too. But imagine who this person is that you came here to be. Imagine that great good that is you in form while I say the words. Breathing in and out, remembering the divinity that walks around in my skin, the face that is known by my name, is just one representation of many. The singularity and the multiplicity, the one in many, each one grounded, centered, fueled by that oneness that lives at the core of my being and the core of everyone's being. That oneness shows up in 100,000 million ways as each one of us steps up to become that greater yes that we have all intended or imagined or dreamed we could become. So I stop and I get really still and I notice what in me wishes to bloom, what in me wishes to express in a new way, having a new experience, and interacting with others in a new way. And I celebrate each and every individual who has provided for me stepping stones, step ladders, cherry pickers, lifts of all sorts to lift me up towards that vision that I had for myself, that divine that lives in me. And I know that truth for every single being. Each one has been lifted on the shoulders of giants and continues to be lifted. So I celebrate that awareness. I celebrate the opportunity for embodiment. I celebrate the participation in life that is right in front of me, right in front of each one, and open and available and ready and excited and joyful and delighted to be able to participate in this glorious thing called life. So celebrating more and more and more of this great good, I relax, allow, and let it be. And so it is.
And so